Go to the situation that I just want to reiterate what I said last night with Commissioner Bratton in Times Square. Again, and I know people are asking this question over and over. I understand a lot of New Yorkers have real concerns and they want to hear what's going on. So I want to keep repeating what people need to know. There is no credible and specific threat against New York City. We have the strongest and best police department in this country. We have the best intelligence capacity of any police force in this country in terms of detecting and preventing terrorism. You can tell 14 years of success since 9/11. That's what the NYPD brings into battle every single day, a proven track record of thwarting these terrorist attempts time and time again. What has gotten even stronger is the ability of the NYPD, the ability of the NYPD to coordinate with our federal partners, the closeness now to the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and other agencies. Literally the highest level of coordination and sharing of information that we've ever experienced. Secretary Clinton, at her remarks earlier today, made a key point that in the past, in this country, and we still see it in Europe, one of the profound challenges was a lack of information sharing and coordination between intelligence entities and public safety entities. Here, we are proud to say there is a seamless relationship between the NYPD and our federal partners. And I've had this conversation with Secretary Johnson of Homeland Security. I've had this conversation with Director Comey of the FBI. They all affirm to me they have never seen such a good and strong relationship. And on top of that, the NYPD's own intelligence gathering capacity all over the world. NYPD had officials already stationed in Paris before this attack. NYPD studied the last Paris attacks and other attacks to learn how we can continue to succeed at preventing terrorism. So there should be great faith in the capacity of NYPD to begin with, but on top of that, just in these last weeks, you've begun to see the results of the decision we made back in June with the City Council to add additional officers, including what will now be a 500-plus officer counterterrorism force, specifically trained, armed, equipped for counterterror activities, our Critical Response Command. You saw just a few days ago the first wave of those officers hit the streets. You've seen how heavily reinforced areas like Times Square have been. We have the ability not only to prevent terror, but we have the strongest anti-terror capacity. We have the strongest ability to respond to an incident of terror of any city in this nation. As Commissioner Bratton said the other day, even as many as 24 incidents could be responded to simultaneously by the NYPD if, God forbid, that day came. The most important thing for New Yorkers to remember is the terrorists want you to change. They want you to be afraid. They want you to change your way of life. They want to undermine our democracy. We will not let the terrorists win. We will not change who we are. We have to be resolute. We have to show we are stronger and better than them by not changing our American values. What people can do is be vigilant. That's a productive, positive thing to do. Be vigilant. And if you see something, say something. If you see anything that you think is suspicious or you have information that you think would help the NYPD, immediately tell an NYPD officer or call 911. That is the practical and productive thing to do. Otherwise, as Commissioner Bratton said so powerfully last night, don't be afraid, be aware. Continue our lives, continue showing this is the greatest city in the world and the greatest nation in the world through our actions. So I'm going to take questions. If there are any questions on that topic specifically, any questions on our follow-up actions, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I'm Peggy Carranza with Univision. My producers would like to know if you're adding extra measures because of the release of this new video.
No, the video, although obviously for every New Yorker, and particularly for New Yorkers who live and work around Times Square and Herald Square, I understand that it causes real concern. But it's important to understand, as Commissioner Bratton clarified last night, it's not new material. This is taken from previous videos that ISIS has put out. It's an attempt at blatant intimidation. I always say New Yorkers don't take well to intimidation. We're not going to be changed by it. There is no real and specific and credible threat. So that video was simply, in effect, boilerplate that ISIS uses to draw attention. ISIS is, if anything, a very effective propaganda machine, and they want the eyes of the world on them, and they want to convince people that they're calling the shots. We don't let them call the shots. So no, there's no real and specific and credible threat. Therefore, life should go on as normal. But what we are doing as a preventative measure is ensuring that some of our busiest parts of the city, like Times Square, you will see plenty of police presence. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could give us your thoughts on the encryption applications that have been criticized by law enforcement. But, you know, some civil libertarians have said this is necessary, you know, to keep messages private.
No, look, I believe in our civil liberties. I believe in our Constitution. But it is unacceptable that law enforcement cannot access information it needs to protect people. This is not consistent with the discussion that was a very real and honest discussion, for example, around the Patriot Act, where there was bipartisan concern about setting certain limits on the government's capacity to gather information. But even within that discussion, there was an understanding, a clear consensus that when it was necessary to protect human life and to facilitate the work of law enforcement, of course they needed access to that information. Here we have evidence already that terrorists are using the products of technology companies and social media companies to facilitate their work and to hide it from law enforcement and from national authorities. That's unacceptable. Those companies have to take responsibility and work with governments to either change their products so that that kind of encryption is not available, or to show governments how to overcome the encryption and come up with new methodologies for doing that. This is a matter of life and death. It's not even close. It's a matter of life and death. Jonathan.
Mr. Mayor, you mentioned a visible police presence at Times Square, Herald Square. The attacks in Paris, though, were centered on soft targets, restaurants, nightclubs. New York has a lot of those.
Of course.
Can you talk a little bit about what security measures are being put in place there? Is it visible police presence, or is there any kind of communication with restaurant owners or nightclub owners about what they should be looking for?
Look, the bottom line here is we cannot change our fundamental behavior. In a city of 8.5 million people, if you want to take the concept of soft target to its fullest extent, that could be any diner, that could be any bodega, it could be any place that people gather in one of the largest cities of the world. The important thing to understand is NYPD is constantly monitoring. Again, we have a tremendous intelligence gathering capacity, constantly monitoring, ensuring that preventive measures are in place all the time according to the information we receive that is actually credible and specific. On top of that, as you've seen for years, and it's being intensified now, there are a number of disruptive things the NYPD does in terms of showing visible police presence in a number of locations, some of our most prominent, some of that might be the most obvious targets, but other places as well. But what everyday citizens can do is that simple notion. Carry on with your lives, but be aware, be vigilant. If you have information, again, always give the benefit of the doubt to telling the police if you think something might be suspicious, if you think you see an unattended package or suitcase, or anything that you think is truly out of the ordinary, you overhear a conversation that worries you, tell the police. That is the best way to address the situation. That kind of vigilance is now a part of our lives. And in the world we're living in, we have to understand something. This will take a while. This phase we're going through will take a while. There's no two ways about it. The fight against ISIS will go on for years. But I believe ISIS will be defeated. We've seen other terror movements defeated in the past. There's a lot of history that shows they can be overcome and they can be made a thing of the past. While we're going through this period of vigilance, people have to be resolved to go on with their lives, but recognize that everyone potentially has something to contribute if they do see something out of the ordinary. Yeah.
Mayor, some have said that when threats come about, they are hesitant of going places, such as New York or Paris or wherever that may happen. What is your opinion on that?
Don't live in fear. Think about it for a moment. Look, as human beings, we understand all the challenges we face in life. We face domestic challenges. As law enforcement will tell you, the biggest threat to law enforcement in the United States in terms of the safety of law enforcement from organized forces is actually from the militias around the country, the right-wing militias who target law enforcement. College students, understandably, after this horrible string of campus massacres over years, should be concerned. But we have to recognize that law enforcement is every day trying to prevent these tragedies, and what we are putting forward a huge amount of resources to do so, and we can't change who we are. We can't change our lives. I think the important thing to recognize is Once you know your enemy wants you to change, everybody has a choice to make. Do we want to play their game? Do we want to give in to them? I was out in the middle of Times Square last night, and it was filled with people who had made their choice. They were going to live their lives, and they were not going to let the terrorists win. A very powerful photo on the cover of one of our newspapers, I think it was yesterday, of Parisians in cafes, such a key part of their culture. They were there after 2 horrible attacks in January and now. They're not going to give in. If our society shuts down, the terrorists have won without ever coming here in any force. They will have won, and we are not going to allow them to win. We have to defeat them militarily. We have to defeat them. I think Secretary Clinton laid out a very good plan today, defeat them ideologically, defeat them through internet and other mass communications. But we cannot let them change who we are. And some voices in this country are playing right into ISIS's hand, but calling on us to close the borders and start discriminating against certain religions. Go check the U.S. Constitution. There's nothing more powerful on the topic of religious respect and tolerance than the U.S. Constitution. And one more point on this. When this country was founded, who were the minorities in this country religiously? Catholics, obviously, Jews, Muslims, Quakers. The vision of this country was they would all be respected and they would all come together to form a country and that it would work. That was an audacious vision 200 plus years ago. Why are we the greatest nation in the world? Because they believed in that vision and we stuck to it. We're not going to stop now. Yes?
Mayor, in light of what you just said and Secretary Clinton's remarks about how this isn't a war on Islam, do you regret that you didn't make more of an effort to meet with Palestinians when you were in Israel and kind of send that message?
I'm very comfortable with the fact, obviously it was a very painful, difficult moment in Israel when I was there. Very comfortable with the fact that I wanted to show concern for people, not movements or governments, but people, and spent time with both Palestinian and Israeli parents and children who are nobly trying to find some way forward out of their conflict. And we in this city believe fundamentally in showing respect for all communities, and our Muslim communities are a crucial part of the city. Overwhelmingly law-abiding people, people who have suffered from terrorist attacks, as we saw on 9/11, the Muslims who died in those attacks, as we saw in Paris, the Muslims who died at the hands of these terrorists. So in our Muslim community, overwhelmingly law-abiding, good New Yorkers who want to help fight terror. And we are adamant about reaching them, working with them ever more closely. We're proud that the city decided to honor the Muslim holidays in our school system. We're going to deepen our connection to our communities. And I think that's what all over the country is the realization of our leadership. The FBI director has spoken very powerfully about this. Our Homeland Security Secretary has spoken about this. The way forward is actually to do the exact opposite of what the extremists are calling for and draw all Americans closer of all religious backgrounds. Last call. Anything else on this topic? Thanks, everyone.